welcome back to another episode of the Carbon Cardboard Podcast. I'm your host, Brian, Q3 Cards, joined as always with my good friend Scott from the F1 Castle. Scott, what a weekend.
Yeah,
One,
exciting.
two racing.
Racing again. We got F1, we got F2, a little bit of everything going on this weekend. So yeah, it was great. Love Imola, old school circuit, hard to overtake on, but fun nonetheless. Gravel.
Well, what was it with Checo? Like, he said something about like F1 cars don't belong here. I mean, what is up with that? Is it just being a horse sport?
No, I think he has a point though, because Imola, is a circuit that goes back pretty far, back into the 80s, and like the cars obviously back then much smaller. So overtaking a lot easier. This is actually like the second hardest track to overtake after Monaco, according to most of the drivers. And the cars are just a little big. Like it's really hard. Like the only prime overtaking spot on this track is on the start finish straight, right? Getting them into turn 1, 2 chicane at the end, and then like maybe in a Tamburello, but like it's dicey. You got to have some serious pace in the car ahead of you to get a pass through over there. So yeah, I mean it's not. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. The cars are pretty big and bulky. I would love to see them like just cut the cars down size wise, and they're doing that a little bit in 2026. But we need to get back to like the 1990s size cars, and they'd really be able to truck them around.
Well, we'll talk about one of those cars in a little bit here. We're going to talk the recap of Imola, Formula 1, Formula 2, some recent activity in the F1 Castle, and maybe I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up now, but I'm going to pepper you when we start talking about the standings about maybe we can re-rank some of the teams that we did a few month episodes. I don't know. Time is a flat circle, my friend.
True. Formula 1, it's all a blur.
It is a blur, literally. So we'll see what upgrades have worked, maybe ones haven't, and maybe do we see a shakeup in the grid later on. However, let's start with activity that it was on track. However, this was just so awesome, and we'll bring it up on screen here. 30th anniversary of the untimely passing of Ayrton Senna, and obviously at this racetrack is where it occurred, 1994.
Yeah, and Ronald Ratzenberger.
Exactly, and that's why I'll bring it up here on screen. But if you're new to the podcast, welcome, and if you're not, you know that this man on screen here is somebody that's near and dear to one of our hosts. You named your child after Sebastian Vettel.
Yep.
And we could go on and on and on about how great Seb was, still is, what it means, but just Scott, what an ambassador. Like, that's the best word I could think of here. Just
an
ambassador for the sport, the history.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was a really cool moment. So obviously, Sebastian Vettel paying tribute to Ayrton Senna, who was his favorite driver growing up. And this is also, a little bit of a personal moment for myself. My dad, his favorite driver was Ayrton Senna. I mean, as much as he liked Max Verstappen later in his life, Ayrton Senna was his guy. Like, I don't remember it because I was very young. I was like 5 years old. But I remember hearing stories of like the day that Ayrton Senna passed. Like my dad was just a wreck, right? And Senna, obviously a legend. He was Vettel's hero as well. So like Senna being my dad's hero, and then Vettel kind of like my hero from my adolescence, young adult life when I was in like high school and college was kind of when Vettel was just crushing in the Red Bull, and I really took to him, and he became someone that I kind of put up on a pedestal. So I love Vettel, my dad loves Senna, and this was just kind of a big meeting of everything. So it was emotional weekend for me as well. Just kind of thinking back to my father and and everything that he instilled in me, including Formula One. So awesome. I mean, Vettel, no one better than Sebastian Vettel, like you said, true ambassador for the sport. I mean, even though he's out of the sport now, I mean, he's still staying involved, staying very close to it. He organized this entire thing, put together not only the tribute to Senna and Ratzenberger, but gave a beautiful speech to the Formula One drivers, to the Formula Two drivers. And they put on a little bit like a run, kind of. They did a run around the track, or bike, or scooter, or whatever you decide to take out there. Um, and then he also got to drive Senna's last race-winning car. So Senna, his last win was actually in 1993. He passed 94, but his last race win was in 1993, and it was in his MP4 8, which Sebastian Vettel owns. Sebastian Vettel owns this car, and he took it out on the track, did laps in it, did some donuts in it. It was really cool to see. I mean, that's the car that Ayrton Senna sat in for his last race win, which is just absolutely legendary. And they had a nice, tribute livery put on it with the Forever Senna and everything. So, yeah, really cool moment. Really awesome to see. Imola, I feel like there's always a little bit of, Senna tribute whenever we come to Imola, because that's where he ultimately passed. But it was special this year for sure. Yeah.
So I guess, Scott, it was also meant to be that those that can see it on screen here, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or on audio only, Max tied Senna for the most consecutive poles in Formula One history at 8.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what a place to do it, right? With all the history and, the 30-year anniversary for Senna. I mean, this was the perfect moment to do it. And this also kind of brings me back to my father, because Senna, like I said, was his favorite race car driver, and one of the main reasons that he really loved Max Verstappen is because Verstappen reminded him so much of Senna in the way that he drives, and really attacks the track. And yeah, I mean, Max needed a little help from Nico Hulkenberg in a little bit of a slipstream. But yeah, he got it done. 8 consecutive poles. He has been on pole position every single race this year. He hasn't won them all, but he's been on pole position every single race. And let's see. Monaco comes up next, and qualifying obviously means everything there. So if he can do it there to get 9, that would be pretty legendary. But yeah, really cool to see for him to tie it. I don't know how my dad would feel about him breaking it. I feel like my dad, he'd love to see him tie it. I don't know if he wants to see that record broken. I think maybe he wouldn't mind if Max takes one off.
Well, if McLaren has anything to say about it, or even potentially Ferrari,
Mhm.
it might be tough for Max. So
Home race for Leclerc,
home
right?
race for Leclerc.
And
Did
he's
you
definitely not
see?
cursed in Monaco.
Did Did you see, Scott, that Oscar Piastri is trying to find anywhere in his lineage where he can make any of these
Uh,
races be a home race for him?
yeah.
Charles Leclerc jokingly offered to adopt Oscar Piastri for this race
There
so
you
that
go.
it as a home race. So
Beautiful.
just gotta watch out for those Aussies. They're very sneaky.
Yeah. Dual citizenship. Monaco. Listen, he'll eventually, most Formula One drivers do get a house in Monaco, set up shop, so.
So I feel like there was like all the other activities leading up to this. Let's talk the Formula One race, then Formula Two, and we'll bring the show home from there. Qualifying, like you said, was very interesting, exciting. McLaren
Oh,
just
yeah.
off. Piastri with the holdup of Magnussen drops down in the grid to fifth. Unfortunately, it really kind of hindered his race.
Yeah.
It was funny, Scott, because I'm sitting here watching the race live on a Sunday, and usually I don't get the opportunity to do that just because I have so many different things going on. I coach my son's soccer team. I feel like I'm never around to enjoy it live. I was watching it live, and my wife was watching with me as well, and I had turned to her in, like, around, like, lap 40-ish or so, and I was like, "This has been a really kind of lackluster, kind of boring race. There's been no crashes." Of course, she goes like, "You want them to crash?" I'm like, "Well, I don't want them to crash, but it does make it a little bit spicy."
Uh,
I feel like Lando was listening to me, Scott, and just decided to just turn it on. Like, wow, like, last 10
yeah.
laps of this was incredible. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so I mean, basically what happened was on the mediums, Red Bull really good. We've seen it kind of throughout the season. Red Bull really good on their tires on the mediums. For whatever reason, on the hards, just didn't get it done. I think one of the things that Max does so well is he can be very gentle on the tires, but it was a little cold. It was a little cold for F1. It was a little cold on race day. And so Max being very gentle on the tires early on kind of just never got the tires into the window. And Lando had pushed a little bit more at the beginning of his stint on the hard tires. And then he kind of went through, there was those radio messages. He's like, "Yeah, I don't have any pace." And he's like, and the engineers coming over, kind of reassuring him, like, "Oh, you'll get there, you'll get there." And by the end, like you said, last 10 laps, Max pace was falling away a little bit, and Lando really started to kick it into, seventh, eighth gear there on those hards, and his pace was undeniable. I mean, Leclerc at one point, with probably 12 or 13 laps to go, was cutting the gap to Lando. And it was like, oh, wow, well, maybe we're going to have a battle for second here. And then Lando started to try to extend his gap from Leclerc. And while he was doing that, he just started eating into Max every lap. He was getting like half a second a lap, and it was like, whoa. And then you're thinking with like 6 laps left, okay, Max is going to respond here, and he just couldn't. He couldn't up the pace, and Lando kept eating into him, kept eating into him. And with about 3 laps left, Lando got to about a second and a half away. And here I was like, okay, this is the defining moment, right? Because you have to be able to break through like the 2 to 1 second gap is really like the no man's land that you need to break through, get through that dirty air. Because when you're 2 seconds behind, you're getting the dirty air off the car in front of you. So you got to be able to break into that under 1 second to then get the benefit of the DRS. And he, couldn't do it. He made one mistake, which he was like 1.4 seconds back, and then he went back up to 1.7 with a little mistake. And then he cut it back down, got under 1 second, but just kind of ran out of time there at the end. And I mean, you got to say, kudos to Max, right? He didn't make any mistakes. I mean, Lando had the pace on him at the end, but Max just did not make a mistake. And that's what's so impressive about what he's doing in the Red Bull right now is, yeah, do they have the fastest car? Probably. And I think even, a lot of people are like, oh, look what Max did, even in, not the fastest car. I don't know if that's true. I think the Red Bull still overall had the best package. I just don't think they got it into the best window this weekend. And Max got it done. Lando, maybe if he had a few more laps, I don't think if he had one more lap, he would have been able to do it. I don't think the first time you have DRS going at Max, you're getting the pass done. He's been known to put an elbow or two out. So I think it would have taken a few laps, but I think in a few laps time, Lando could have got him. Now, granted, I mean, a race is a certain race distance, right? And it's all about putting together the best race over that distance. So, ifs, buts, and maybes, but McLaren, and especially in the hands of Lando over a race distance, is right there. And I say that because, again, Piastri actually qualified ahead of Lando. And if not for, the untimely blocking of Kevin Magnussen, he would have started in second. And maybe he would have been the one kind of chasing him down. But I think Lando still does have a little bit of an edge race pace wise, especially over the duration of the entire race, right? Oscar, I mean, man, he was hounding down Carlos Sainz at the beginning, but he was really eating into his tires and it hurt him. And he didn't have a chance to come back at Leclerc at the end, right? He was pretty far back. But yeah, really good for McLaren. Lando right on him. I mean, imagine if we have a Max and Lando battle the rest of this year. That would be exciting for sure.
I know as card collector, Scott, I don't think Lando is the one hit wonder that some thought. I think he's got some
Nope.
staying power.
Oh yeah.
I had a little. I don't have a lot of frame of reference because I like I mentioned on the last episode, I only started watching in 2021. So my introduction to Formula One was a heck of a battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Like, this is like the first time since that season that I was like, we've kind of got something legitimate going on here. I know Leclerc and Max at the beginning of the 2022 season
Yeah.
had a couple back and forths. You know, Leclerc overtook him a couple times on track, but then just really fell off. So it'll be interesting. I want to see if McLaren can have that staying power and race after race. It's a little bit of a cat and mouse. I would love to see, and I'm sure you would as well, Scott, is some of the strategy on track can give some of that advantage. Again, going back to that 2021 season between Red Bull and Mercedes, sometimes between teamwork and undercuts, overcut, like all that other stuff
Yeah.
can potentially make a difference over the course of a race.
Yeah, and that's why it's so unfortunate that Oscar had the 3 place grid penalty. Because I mean, if you imagine of having Oscar and Lando right up there on Max, maybe Oscar hits early or runs long. Either way, they kind of play the strategy to force Max to make a decision and Red Bull to make a decision, and then they've got the alternative strategy, and if it ends up being the better strategy, they get the win, and if not, then they're in a straight one-on-one fight, the other way. So yeah, I mean, I think Oscar being demoted 3 places really hurt their chances of getting a win here. But I mean, hey, if you're a McLaren fan, you are happy because this weekend, Red Bull brought upgrades, Ferrari brought upgrades, Mercedes brought upgrades, Aston Martin brought upgrades, and McLaren is clearly the second fastest team. And I mean, when we were talking about our rankings earlier in the year, McLaren was in third. They were
Mhm.
solidly in third. They were not, I mean, they were close, but not close enough to Ferrari. And then they were ahead of, Mercedes, Aston Martin behind. But now they are solidly in second. I mean, after Ferrari brought upgrades, McLaren is still the second fastest car. And they're nipping at Red Bull. So it's exciting to see. If you're a Papaya fan, and I mean, I'm a big Lando guy, and I like Oscar too. So I mean, it's exciting no matter what, to see someone challenging Max up front. So yeah, excited.
One last comment before we switch over to the F2 results here, Scott. Do you think Ferrari may have tried to go long and with the hope that there was a safety car? Like, hey, it worked for McLaren in
Yeah.
Miami. Let's stay out. And I just feel like Ferrari kind of cooked their tires, and by the time they had the opportunity to come back, they were just off the pace at that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think obviously you're right. You're always going to try alternative strategies, and you never know, right? I mean, I think they were going to end up finishing probably third and fifth if they had followed the same strategy as McLaren, and ultimately in the end, third and fifth is where they landed, right? I think Leclerc, after how hard Piastri pushed in his first stint, I don't think he really was going to have a shot at Leclerc. So I think Leclerc kind of, good for him. Tifosi were very happy to see a Ferrari on the podium. But yeah, and I mean, the last thing I want to touch on too, in terms of those upgrades, Mercedes upgrades definitely have brought them up a bit. They are solidly in fourth, I would say now. Aston Martin. And by the way, Aston Martin brought the most upgrades of any team to this race. And I mean, this is one of Fernando Alonso's most abysmal weekends I've seen in a long time. And Lance Stroll just barely scraping out points in ninth. They're fighting with RB right now. They are, and RB didn't even bring any upgrades. All they brought was, their entire factory over to the race because they're like 10 miles away. So actually everyone who works at the factory, they bought tickets for, and they took up like an entire grandstand, which is really cool to see. But yeah, so they just brought a bunch of spirit and let's goes. And Yuki got into the points again, and both of their drivers did well in qualifying. So I think they're fighting with Aston Martin right now. Aston Martin really needs to figure out how to add upgrades, because this is the same thing that happened to them last year, except last year they started further up the grid and then their upgrades didn't really pan out. This year they're starting from lower and their upgrades again not really panning out. So I think right now it's still Red Bull up front, and then you've got McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes kind of finally solidly in fourth, kind of breaking away from Aston Martin and RB a bit. And then Aston Martin and RB really are going to be duking it out for those last points paying positions. So it's exciting. It's exciting. It's good to see kind of the teams locking in after we've seen kind of the first series of upgrades for the majority of teams. And now hopefully we'll see a little more variability depending on the track, because that's really what you want to see. You want to see teams that are close enough where it's track dependent as to which team is going to be the best car, right? And so hopefully just bite a little bit more out of Red Bull, and we're in for an entertaining season, in one that we thought was going to be one of the worst ever. Everyone was already, calling curtains on it and waiting for 2025, and here we are, excited for the next few races.
Any given Sunday.
That's right.
Any given Sunday with Formula 2, Scott.
Yeah. Oh, Formula 2. Oh, it's so nice to have Formula 2 back. I mean, I am, obviously, if you know me, I'm just a Formula 1, Formula 2 kind of racing nerd. So I love watching all this stuff, qualifying for Formula 2, sprint race, feature race, like give me that stuff. And it was great to have it back. It's so much additional excitement to the weekend. And these guys, these guys really go at it. Like if you wanted to see cars going off into the gravel, crashes and stuff, Formula 2 is where it was at. But qualifying was exciting. We saw, Behrman and Antonelli qualified second and fourth. Both had their lap times deleted. And they were in 18th and 20th. And then they got reinstated in the second and fourth. So I was like, oh, okay. So now we're on for it. And you can see here in the end, Behrman, nowhere to be seen. We'll get to that in a second. But Hadjar, I've been screaming from the top of the mountains ever since Australia. Watch out for Hadjar, the Haj, as we call him here in the F1 Castle. But like I said, he won in Australia in the feature race. He should have won the sprint race if not for a penalty. He wins again here in Imola, and he's in third place in the standings, and it's getting close. And Gabriel Bortoleto, who was on pole, ended up finishing second. And Joshua Dirksen, shout out to Dirksen, who is the first ever driver from Paraguay to be on a Formula 2 podium. So really cool to see. And then we got Antonelli picking it up here, fourth place. He moved up six spots in the standings. So he's doing pretty well. Colapinto, fifth in the feature and first in the sprint race. So he also had a good weekend. Paul Aaron, sixth in the feature, second in the sprint race. He's up there in second. He's only a few points. He's 5 points away from Zane Maloney now. So yeah, things are getting up. How about Victor Martins too? I mean, he's got to, get his head out of the sand in qualifying, but he passed I think 10, 11 people in the feature race, finished ninth and had fastest lap. I mean, once ART can wrap their heads around qualifying, he's gonna be up there. But like we said, Behrman, where is he, Bryan? Where's Behrman?
I don't know. You tell me.
Oh man, Behrman. So Behrman again, he qualified second right at the start, takes the lead immediately. Literally, first corner, Behrman's in the lead. And he had really good pace. He looked like he had it in the bag. Goes into the pits. Formula 2, generally only one pit stop. You're either running on, the primes or the option tires. Takes his first pit stop, and car stalls. And then they jump start it, and it stalls again. And he jump start it, and then he finally gets going, and all of a sudden he goes from first to last. And his race was basically done. I think he finished 19th, but oh, Behrman, man, he's like the Valtteri Bottas right now of Formula 1. He can't catch a break in the pits, and it's killing him right now. So, yeah, no points for Behrman in the feature race. So, but he's got the pace, right? It's really good to see, really nice to see him, qualifying second after his FP1 session or before his FP1 session. And then, was running a good race and no fault of his own, ended up not getting a good result, but he definitely did have a good result in the F1 Castle.
That's what we call in the biz a segue.
Yeah.
Behrman had a pretty good Saturday afternoon in the F1 Castle, like you said.
Yeah, started off with we had the 10 out of 10 purple portrait in a sapphire case, and later in that case, 1 of 1 Oliver Behrman portrait from Sapphire, his biggest card in Sapphire. And you could argue, at least a top 3 Behrman card just in general, right? So nasty. And of course it was for Jeff. He's taking the shots, at the end of the day, he's getting the most cards, but he's taking the most shots. And in the F1 castle, you're going to hit Behrman, 1 of 1 pad portrait. Let me see if I can get up here. Look at that in the
Let me go
flesh.
solo on you here.
That is just beautiful.
Well centered too.
Yeah. Hoping for a 10. But yeah, that was definitely the biggest pull we had over the weekend. It was a midday Saturday rip. So after qualifying and after the sprint race for Formula 2, we're like, yeah, why not do some 2023 Sapphire and hit a 1-on-1 Behrman portrait. Jeff's like, yeah, I guess I'll rip. It was funny because he hit the purple and he had actually just hit the red from Beef, who rips Formula 1 in soccer over on Whatnot on Instagram. He had hit the red portrait of Behrman with him. And so then he hits the purple and he was like, oh yeah, you know what? Let's go for the rainbow. And he's like, is the pad still live? And I was like, yeah, it's live. I was like, it's in one of my cases. And then like 4 packs later, I was like, oh, here's a pad. And so he sweat it all the way to the end. And sure enough, Oliver Behrman.
Only in the F1 castle, as the hashtag goes.
Yeah.
How much do you think? I know you get asked this question an awful lot, Scott, in your streams, whether it's on Fanatics Live or Instagram. What do you think the percentage of cases that have been opened so far? I mean, I know you've opened quite a bit. I know that there's a lot of other breakers like Golden Pulls, etc., that are also out there ripping quite a bit of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean Sapphire,
Sapphire.
yeah, because Chrome, there's definitely still a bunch left, but Sapphire, I mean, man, there's only 1,038 cases. I would guess there's less than 300 left.
Wow.
Like, I think we've been through like 70% of this product because it has just been ravenous. And again, this stuff's only been out for 2 months, 2.5 months, and we're already down into. But I will say that at least what we've seen in Formula 1, especially with Sapphire, is that usually you see a massive tear at the beginning, right? Like, I think we went through 50% of this stuff in 1 month, and then we've probably gone through another 20% in the month after that. But yeah, I mean, if I had to wager a guess, I'd say there's less than 300 cases left, and I've got a few. So we definitely have some more. We definitely have some more 1-of-1s and superfractors. They're hiding in there, down in the castle dungeon, waiting to be unleashed.
Love to see it. So I think we might be able to keep this under 30 minutes this episode, which is great.
Love it.
You and I both love to talk. So with just a few seconds left here, Scott, what's coming up next in the F1 castle?
So we cracked open a 2020 Sapphire case last week. Ran the first 3 boxes. So far, we've seen 2 variations out of 3 boxes. So, again, you're only supposed to average like 3 or 4 in a case, but lately we've been getting like 8. So we've seen 2. They were both gold. It was Gasly and Ocon. So 2 gold image variations. We haven't seen a purple, haven't seen a red, haven't seen a pad, but we ran the first 3 boxes from 2020 Sapphire case. So we're running the next 3 probably tomorrow night. So when you're listening to this, probably be Tuesday or Wednesday night. We're gonna run the next 3, and then we're gonna get some more 2023 Sapphire going. We just ran a 5 caser of Chrome on Fanatics, so looking to do some more Sapphire. Probably run maybe a two cases of Sapphire. But yeah, that's always fun. Love Sapphire.
Love to see it. So, all right. So if we can keep this under 30 minutes, it'll be a small accomplishment for both you and I. So I will throw it over to you, my friend, to bring us home.
All right. Well, again, guys, it's Monaco race week, and we probably will be back this week for another pre-race episode. Be sure to look out for that at the end of the week. But until then, guys, collect your cardboard and keep it carbon.